So listen, there's a lot of people out there, women especially that I meet that are powerful, but today we decided to do a little different. I said, why don't we go find the most powerful women in India, a country of 1.2, 1.3 billion people, according to Fortune magazine, she's the most powerful woman in India. And according to Forbes, she's the top 25 most powerful woman in the world. And that is SBI's former chairman, Arundhati. Thank you so much for taking the time and welcoming us into your place. It's been a wonderful experience being in India. And yesterday, you and I were both speaking at the IIT Summit, and we were in the back talking. And then the news folks came, and I'm like, listen, I'm trying to speak to this woman, and I'm trying to learn from her, and everybody's distracted. And so I'm glad we had the time to get back together here today. So to put some things into perspective, your career has been absolutely amazing. And in India, you're obviously celebrated by a lot of different people. You took a bank that's been around since 1800s, I believe, right?
Yes.
SBI has been around for a while. And recently, before you leaving, you had 5 associate banks that I think came together, which made SBI now the 50th largest bank in the world. I think you guys have 278,000 employees. I'm trying to see if I'm getting the numbers right. 500 million customers, right?
That's right.
24,000 branches you have, give or take, the numbers that I'm saying. And you're the chairman running this entire company. So before you became this person, how did the whole thing get started initially for you?
I joined the bank a long time back. In fact, I served it for 40 long years.
So now you and I, when you were talking yesterday, you were sharing with me that, I asked you, I said, so is it very common for a woman to be running banks? And some of the stories you were telling me was fascinating because you are the first chairman of a Fortune 500 company that's based out of India. I think you're the first to do that.
That's right.
But are there a lot of other women that are running banks and major financial firms here in India? Is this becoming a very normal thing?
Yes, it has. Because if you look at the largest private sector bank, that's also run by a woman. And she's been running it now for the past 7 years. Then the number 3 private sector bank is also run by another woman. At one point of time, the number 2 public sector bank also had a woman as the leader. In fact, even foreign banks in India, a number of them are led by women. So whether it be Bank of America, Standard Chartered, Morgan Stanley, HSBC at one point of time, she's also just retired. So a large number of foreign banks in India also have women as their heads.
I asked you this question, and I'm going to ask it again. Why do you think that is there a reasoning? Is it the fact that, is it because culturally in India the women make the decision for money, or it just so happened that women came up in the leadership position?
I don't think culturally women make the decision where money is concerned. I think what happened in 1969, the Indian government went in for nationalization of banks. And the idea was that banks weren't really expanding and spreading out towards the villages and getting more and more people or providing more and more banking services to people. So the mandate on nationalization was expansion at a very fast pace. And when that happened, a lot of jobs came into being. And in those days, there weren't too many opportunities for jobs. The private sector wasn't as vibrant as it is today, and you needed to know people in order to sort of, get a job. So that is when I think, a lot of women got in because they felt that this was an opportunity that you could avail of on the basis of merit alone. So you needed nothing other than
That's
merit.
phenomenal. That's exactly what you want.
That's right. But the fact remains that in India, this is something really strange. But we had calculated at one point of time when I was chairman, about 55% of banking assets were being led by women.
That's unbelievable.
That's
55%.
Right. That's right.
I mean, that's...
Because our bank alone is 23%.
You know what would be fascinating is for Harvard to do a case study on India. Because I think if they keep talking about, inequality and all the gender equality, all this around the world, this is not just an America thing, it's all over the world. This would be a very interesting case study to see what happened in India that caused where 55% of the money is being controlled by women. What was the reason behind that? But so I guess my next question for you would be, you talk about the fact that you traveled a lot. And you're married, your husband's also a career person. He's an ex-professor of IIT. Which one is?
Kharagpur.
Okay, so
that's in the east.
That's in the east.
Yeah.
And your growing, you're traveling, you're having to do all this stuff, and you also have a daughter, you have a child as well. Was there a point where in your career you were going where you hit a marker where you had to make a decision that was extremely difficult within your personal life? And if you did go through that, what decisions did you have to make? How did you process that to say, because I can't see somebody like yourself being the most powerful woman in India and not having at some point where you have to make some very difficult decisions that somebody may say, you know what, I'm just going to be a mom. I'm just going to sit home. Did you go through that? And if you did, could you tell us about it?
Means, as you rightly said, I think there is hardly a woman who has a family who doesn't go through that at some point of time. Yes, I did go through it, and luckily, probably I had the right kind of support structure to enable me to get past it. For instance, when I got posted to New York, my child was very, very small and she needed special care as well. Very luckily, my aunt, who had just retired, and she lives with us, so she agreed to come along with me.
To New York?
To New York, okay, to look after the child. So that was really a godsend, and things worked very well. I left for New York alongside of her, and for 1.5 years things were fine. But then the immigration attorney, he told us that, probably, you will not be able to get another extension of visa. She was getting a 6-month visa. So she got 2 extensions. They said, third time, in all probability, she'll get refused. And if she gets refused, she won't be able to come back to the country again.
Gosh.
So, it's better if she goes back for a year. And then for the remaining 1.5 years of your term, we used to have 4-year terms, she can come back. So this 1 year, fine, if that's the way it should be done, that was okay with us, but what happens to the child? And as you can imagine, the child at that point of time was spending much of her time with my aunt. So both my aunt and my mother back in India, they sort of insisted that it's only a matter of 1 year. She's still very young, so you send her back to India for a year. Okay, and obviously, it's been one of the toughest decisions. My husband by that time had joined me. So he said he would support my decision, whatever, but it was mine to take. Okay, so after a lot of, toing and froing and trying to understand the pros and cons and talking to the doctors and the counselors and everything, ultimately I decided to send her back to India. But in those days, we had no Skype, no FaceTime, no nothing. And even the phones were very unreliable. We didn't have mobile phones either. So very unreliable phone lines. And in India, sometimes when you called, you could hear a ringing sound, but actually speaking, the person on the other side would probably have a dead phone. So, every morning I would call and every evening I'd call. And if I couldn't get through one of those times, till I got through, I was an absolute pins and needles. And I think all my parents' neighbors, they also came to know about it because, if I couldn't get through on my mother's line, I would get through on one of the neighbors. So they also took to finding out how my daughter was doing. So it was almost a
community,
joint neighborhood effort to assure me that she was doing fine. But anyway, luckily after the year was over, she did get a renewal of her visa and she did come back.
Let me ask you, when it comes down to that, if you were to speak to the women out there, the ladies out there who are mothers or they're running a business, what could you say to them when it comes down to the processing on how to handle this better? Because men are wired slightly different than a woman. How could you? What could you say to them?
See, again, I think what happens is when you continue to do your best in whichever area you are in, you are setting certain examples. Okay, because at the end of the day, if you are achieving something, it makes everybody around you feel good, and it's good to have people feeling good at home. Okay. I don't think, that small things like whether you're giving them their food or whether you're, standing beside them as they do their homework, I don't think these are things that are so very important, okay? And very often what happens is we get sidetracked by certain rules that society puts out for us, okay? So for instance, in Indian society, the woman of the household is expected to eat after everybody else has eaten. This used to happen in our parents' generation. Now, if you take that as a rule, then, and you are not able to do it, very often you won't be if you're in a job like mine, then you start having all kinds of guilt feelings, which are absolutely useless, because why should you be bound by, rules that society makes for you?
Wow.
So I think, overall, I don't really believe that, you're shortchanging anybody if you're doing a job there. Okay. Of course, there are times when you need to prioritize. Okay. And that prioritization has to happen. For instance, somebody is sick at home, you need to prioritize. Very often people ask me, how do you do that? Because, there might be a crisis in the office as well.
Sure.
And my short answer to that is that you must have excellent teamwork. And excellent teamwork means that when the leader or a member steps away, the rest can fill in the breach without missing a beat. Okay. So, if you can get your team to be like that, then you can continue to prioritize when you need to prioritize. And there will be times, I fully agree, that you cannot always prioritize office over home. There will be times when home will need it, and similarly vice versa. But for both, you need to have those kinds of teams that can take up the slack immediately, and you won't feel missed. Again, I'll tell you, why do people not do that? Because many people are not confident enough to make themselves dispensable. Okay?
Many people are not confident enough to make themselves dispensable.
Yes, you always want to be indispensable. Because you're not confident that even when you are away,
Wow.
or even if you've made yourself dispensable, even then you will still be valued and you will still be wanted.
Yeah.
That's a very, very difficult space to be in.
No doubt about it, yeah.
And you're always trying to sort of protect whatever you have so that, if you go away, those others won't be able to manage. If you do that, then you're not going to be able to prioritize one over the other.
What a way of thinking. This traditional way of thinking, this is your way of thinking. That philosophy it's incredible. So two questions for you with this, because that part was family, right? What things you had to go through as a family. Now let's talk about, to become a chairman, you have to be a leader. You're not just going to become a chairman without knowing how to sit in boardrooms, manage ego, deal with egos, different personalities, leading men, leading women, customer issues, political issues, diplomatic issues, all these different compliance issues. How do you, when leading a team, when a crisis happens, what is your immediate, how are you processing a crisis, whether it's leadership, political, market, whatever it is? How are you processing that as you're leading your team?
As a leader, if you want to be effective, you must be able to get the bigger picture from as few data points as possible. So to the extent that you should be able to see what you are going to come up against. Okay? If you're not able to more or less visualize what is ahead of you, and then you just go and hit it, there's a problem. That's one thing. The second thing I think we have to understand is that you must understand who's good at what. Okay. And if you have understood that, and if you understand the broader picture, then it's much easier to delegate the right pieces to the right people. Now, if you do that, what happens is, if there is a crisis, then you can immediately call up that particular team and have them sort of start responding in a very, what should I say, in a manner that is something which they are capable of doing, or I should say, the speed of response would be very good. So, again, very important to get the right people in place in the right kinds of jobs. Very important to be able to trust your team so that that if you tell them to get something done, they will get it done. So how do you understand that? Observing them, seeing what they're good at, seeing what they're enjoying doing. I think some of these things do work in, but at the end of the day, it is partly intuition as well.
Got it. Interesting. Okay, and the last question, this will be the last question, is India. I was invited to come to IIT, and initially we were not able to make it work, so finally we came back and decided to come out, and I've completely fallen in love. Mm-hmm. Just the culture, the community, the way it is, it's unbelievable. India now has the sixth largest GDP in the world, right? You are the largest democracy. You are the second largest English-speaking country in the world outside of America. You are now like the level of wanting to learn, the hunger factor with these younger entrepreneurs coming up and You're having young stories with people that all of a sudden this guy becomes a billionaire. That guy, you have a lot of good stories right now in India. What do you foresee taking place with the economy of India and the opportunity of entrepreneurship in India, especially someone like yourself who has worked with them? Because when it comes down to they need money, startup capital, all this, you're in these conversations. What do you foresee happening with the marketplace of India?
See, one reason why India skipped the manufacturing stage altogether and became a services economy is because Indians are basically entrepreneurs. Okay. However, India is still a developing country. It's not a rich country. So people don't have capital. For becoming a manufacturing nation, you need capital, either your own or that which comes and gets invested here from outside. India had neither. Now, because they had neither, there was no other way for them to go ahead and give play to their entrepreneurial skills unless they got into the services sector, where actually the need for capital is much lower. Okay, that's one of the reasons why we have done so well. The second, I think, important thing about India, and there is a book by one Guricharan Das. He writes exceptionally well. And if you can read that book, you should. It says India grows at night. Okay. So the fact of the matter is, India has always grown from the bottom. It's not a centrally controlled country. The center has never been exceptionally strong. Okay. So the entire entrepreneurial spirit, it stems from the grassroots. And because of that, this country is very different from many others. That is one of the reasons why even today, if you go into tier 2, tier 3 cities, tier 4 cities, you'll find small businesses, because people are doing something or the other. And that's maybe one of the reasons why, even though we have 12 to 15 million people coming onto the work stream every year, in spite of that, you don't have the kind of social unrest that you would expect, any other such country to have. And that's one of the reasons why I believe, that going forward, this is a country that is very, very well suited to the new age. And the reason for that, again, is that we are evolving at a very fast pace.
I noticed that.
We are changing at a very fast pace. Those people who are very disciplined and rule-bound, they will find it more and more difficult as it goes ahead. Not
more difficult?
Yes, because, they're very rule-bound. So unless the rules are in place, you don't know how to react to it. In India, however, it's good to be disciplined. I'm not saying otherwise. It's good to be disciplined, it's good to be rule-bound. But you also need that ability to be able to think, beyond the rules and react if suddenly certain things happen. I continue to give this example of demonetization. Demonetization happened in this country. 86% of the notes, of the currency notes, were suddenly considered invalid in the space of 1 day. 86% of notes in a country which is cash to the extent of 12% of GDP. So it's a very cash-oriented economy. And yet, we managed. Of course, there were pains. But at the end of the day, there wasn't, rioting or looting or anything of the sort. And in 60 days' time, the whole system did manage to get back on its feet. And remonetization, as we called it, happened. So the fact is, I doubt very much whether such a huge exercise could have been done in any other country. And you can imagine the logistics requirement, because the new notes had to be printed, they had to be supplied, they had to be taken into the far reaches of the country, and you can't move new currency notes in your pockets.
Sure.
When you move, as it's called, treasure, you have to have security, you have to give them the road plan, you have to get the clearances. If you're moving it around across state borders, both the states should be on board. So, there is a lot of formalities towards, the logistics are quite mind-blowing. But all of that still got done. And we did it without notice. Actually speaking, very few of people believe that there was no notice. But I'm telling you God's own truth, no notice. 1 day's notice. 8 o'clock in the evening, we get to know. We are told next day is a holiday, and the day after, we are up and running. We had only 1 day. Only 1 day in between, the banks were closed. And the next day at 10 o'clock, we all opened our counters and we had new notes to give. Maybe not as many as we wanted, but we had some.
I remember that.
Yes. So, that's what I'm trying to say. That's where I think, the ability Indians means maybe it's some kind of a tensile strength that we have. I think that is something that's very important to understand, that this is a country that will sort of find its way no matter what. And if our leaders are able to do a little more hand-holding and make our path smoother, so much the better.
So you think some of these guys that are all about following the rules and the disciplines, you think the younger generation are the ones that are going to break some rules and create new innovation? Is that what you're thinking?
I should think so, yes.
Got it.
Again, it doesn't do if you have a society that doesn't look at rules or is indisciplined.
Sure.
It doesn't do. But what I'm trying to say is that you have to have the ability to switch from one to the other, given the crisis that you are facing or the situation that you're facing. In the normal situation, great to be absolutely disciplined and ruled out. But if the situation is normal, not normal, how then do you face it? Are you still able to manage, if you're given a set of circumstances which you never envisaged? How do you get around it? How do you manage in spite of it? I think that's something that's very important.
Incredible. I can talk to you for a while, but I wanted to keep our commitment to the time that we had. And thank you so much for welcoming us to your place. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.